At just 17, Michael Flores knew exactly what he wanted: to build a life with his hands, to hear the deep rumble of an engine coming to life under his touch, to spend his days covered in grease rather than buried in textbooks. Ever since he was a kid growing up in a small Texas town, he had been fascinated by cars. While other kids played video games or joined sports teams, Michael spent his weekends at a local garage, watching the mechanics work with a level of skill and precision that felt like an art form. He knew, without a doubt, that this was his calling. But in the Flores household, passion wasn't a career plan, college was. His parents, Robert and Linda, had fought their way out of poverty, believing that a degree was the only way to secure a better future. To them, success meant a stable office job, benefits, and a retirement plan, not long hours in a garage, breaking his back for what they saw as a dead-end trade. Michael sat in the dimly lit kitchen, his hands clenched into fists under the table. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. His mother, Linda, stood by the sink, arms crossed tightly over her chest, while his father, Robert, leaned back in his chair, his expression cold and unyielding. "Let me get this straight," Robert said, his voice dangerously calm. "You're telling us that instead of going to college, instead of getting a real career, you want to spend your life covered in grease, fixing cars for a living?" Michael met his father's gaze, his heart pounding. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "That's exactly what I'm saying." His mother scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. "You have no idea what you're throwing away, Michael. Do you think we worked this hard, sacrificed this much, just for you to become some mechanic?" Michael's jaw tightened. He knew his parents had struggled, had fought their way out of poverty, but that didn't mean their path had to be his. "It's not just being a mechanic, Mom. It's a real job. A good job. I can make a living doing something I actually love." "Love doesn't pay the bills," Robert snapped. "A degree does. An education gives you options. You think turning a wrench is going to take you anywhere?" Michael felt his face heat with frustration. There are guys out there making six figures in this field. Not everyone has to sit behind a desk to be successful. But they weren't listening. They never had. Linda turned away, her voice quieter now, but still laced with disappointment. "You'll regret this," she murmured. "One day, you'll see how wrong you are. And by then, it'll be too late." Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. He wanted to scream, to make them understand, but he knew it was useless. His father stood up, pushing his chair back with a sharp scrape against the tile floor. "If you won't listen to us," Robert said, "then you're on your own." Linda didn't protest. She didn't try to stop him. She just looked at Michael with tired, wounded eyes, as if he had broken something between them that could never be repaired. And just like that, his home was no longer his. Michael swallowed hard, but he didn't waver. He turned toward the stairs, heading to his room to pack. As he walked out into the cool night air, Michael stood on the sidewalk in front of his house, a worn-out duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The Texas heat bore down on him, sweat clinging to his skin, but he barely noticed. His father hadn't even looked at him when he walked out the door. His mother had only whispered a final warning. "You'll be back, Michael. You'll see." But he wouldn't. With only $200 in his pocket and a folded acceptance letter from a trade school in Houston, Michael took his first steps toward a life of his own. The Greyhound bus rattled down the highway, its cracked leather seats stiff beneath him. He had barely slept the night before, but exhaustion couldn't drown out the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Excitement, fear, defiance. He had no safety net, no backup plan. Just a chance to prove them wrong. The scholarship covered his tuition, but that was it. No dorm, no meal plan, no cushion to fall back on. By the time he arrived in Houston, his $200 felt like nothing. It barely covered the first month's rent for a tiny, windowless room in a rundown apartment complex. The walls were thin, the mattress sagged in the middle, and the faucet leaked, but it was his. The first difficulty. His classmates at the trade school came from all walks of life, some fresh out of high school, others older men trying to rebuild after layoffs. The instructors were tough, expecting nothing less than perfection. If Michael made a mistake, they let him know. If he slacked off, they had no problem calling him out. But for the first time in his life, he felt alive. Michael's first few months in Houston were nothing short of brutal. The $200 he had when he arrived disappeared faster than he expected. Rent, food, bus fare. Every dollar counted, and there were never enough of them. It didn't take long for reality to sink in. Passion alone wouldn't keep a roof over his head. By day, he threw himself into his trade school courses, his hands caked in grease, his mind constantly running through wiring diagrams and torque specifications. The smell of motor oil and metal became familiar, almost comforting. But when the sun set, his world shifted. Dreams of becoming a skilled mechanic faded into the background as survival took center stage. He found his first job at a gas station off the highway, working the graveyard shift. Midnight to 6 a.m., he stood behind the counter, ringing up packs of cigarettes, cheap coffee, and lottery tickets for truckers and restless drifters. The job was monotonous, but the exhaustion was the real challenge. His body screamed for rest, but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford. Some nights, he fought to keep his eyes open. Other nights, the tension in his shoulders from a full day of working on cars left him too wired to rest. He learned to steal moments of sleep in the back room during his break, his head resting on a stack of empty soda crates, before heading straight to class at sunrise. But the gas station paycheck barely covered his rent. Bills kept piling up, and his stomach growled more often than he cared to admit. So he found another job. On weekends, he picked up shifts delivering food for a local diner. The pay was unpredictable. Some nights, a few generous tips meant he could eat a full meal. Other nights, he barely covered the cost of gas. The manager, a gruff old man named Tom, noticed Michael's struggle and took pity on him, letting him take home leftovers from canceled orders. Those cold burgers and half-eaten sandwiches became lifelines. It wasn't just the exhaustion that wore him down. It was the loneliness. Coming home to a dark, empty apartment with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator for company. The quiet resentment in his classmates' eyes as they talked about their weekends while he wiped grease from his hands, pretending not to care. The nights spent staring at his phone, debating whether to call home, whether to prove his mother right. One particularly rough night, after a grueling double shift at the gas station and the diner, Michael collapsed onto the thin mattress in his apartment. His body ached from head to toe, and hunger gnawed at his insides. His phone sat on the nightstand, his mother's number still in his contacts. He imagined the conversation, the scorn in her voice, the thinly veiled, "I told you so." Maybe he had been foolish. Maybe he should have swallowed his pride and gone to college like they wanted. Maybe they were right. He rubbed his hands together, feeling the rough calluses forming on his palms. These weren't the hands of a failure. They were the hands of someone who worked, someone who fought, someone who refused to quit. The next morning, he woke up before dawn and dragged himself to class. The exhaustion didn't disappear, but something inside him shifted. He stopped counting the hours of sleep he missed and started counting the skills he gained. He paid less attention to what he didn't have and focused on what he was building. The struggle became routine. Wake up, work, class, work again, sleep if he had time. He became efficient in his exhaustion, learning to function on sheer willpower. Every wrench he turned, every part he replaced, every late-night shift he endured was a step forward. One day, as he was finishing up a particularly tough repair in class, his instructor, a no-nonsense man named Mr. Gaines, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You've got a good head for this, Michael," he said. "A lot of kids come through here, but not many have your drive." Michael nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't need praise. He needed results. He needed to prove, not just to his parents but to himself, that he could make it. And so, he kept pushing forward. He stopped looking back, stopped questioning his choices. Because he knew, deep down, that this was his path. The exhaustion, the hunger, the loneliness, they were just obstacles, not dead ends. He had come too far to turn around now. And for the first time in a long time, he believed he was going to make it. Michael's life took a sharp turn one evening when he met Tom Whitaker, a seasoned mechanic who had been fixing cars longer than Michael had been alive. Tom owned a small, cluttered garage on the outskirts of Houston, the kind of place where grease stained the floors and the air smelled of motor oil, metal, and years of hard work. It wasn't the kind of shop that looked impressive from the outside: faded signage, rusting tool cabinets, and a narrow waiting area that smelled faintly of burnt rubber. But to Michael, it was the most incredible place he had ever set foot in. Michael had originally stopped by looking for a part for a class project, but something about the way he spoke, the way his eyes lit up when discussing engines, caught Tom's attention. The old mechanic, Wiping his hands on a rag stained with years of labor, studied the young man for a moment before asking, "You serious about this trade, kid?" "Yes, sir," Michael replied without hesitation. Tom raised an eyebrow. He'd seen plenty of young men pass through his shop, most of them eager at first but unwilling to put in the real effort it took to make it in the trade. But there was something different about Michael, something in the way he held himself, the way he paid attention to every detail around him. "Show up here tomorrow at 6, Tom said. "We'll see what you can do." Michael didn't waste a second. For the next few months, he spent every spare hour at Tom's shop, soaking up every bit of knowledge he could. Unlike school, where lessons were structured and theoretical, Tom's teaching was raw, unfiltered, and hands-on. "Feel the machine," Tom would say, placing a firm hand on the hood of a car. "A car will tell you what's wrong if you know how to listen." It wasn't just about memorizing parts or following manuals. It was about intuition, about developing a connection with the machines he worked on. Michael learned quickly. He stayed late, long after Tom had locked up for the night, tinkering with engines and practicing his diagnostics. It wasn't just work, it was passion. He loved the challenge of solving mechanical problems, the satisfaction of bringing an old, broken-down vehicle back to life. Tom, who had started as a skeptical mentor, became something of a surrogate father figure to Michael. He saw the drive in him, the hunger to prove himself. And in return for Michael's dedication, Tom did something he rarely did for anyone. He vouched for him. That recommendation led to a break Michael never expected. At 19, after proving his skills and dedication, Michael landed a job at one of Houston's most well-respected auto repair shops, a business that handled everything from everyday repairs to high-end luxury vehicles. Compared to the grueling gas station shifts and delivery jobs he had juggled before, this was a dream. The pay was solid, better than what many of his old high school friends were making while they were still buried under college textbooks and student loan debt. More importantly, for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of stability. He could afford rent without anxiety. He could save. He even sent a small sum back home, not out of obligation, but as a quiet, unspoken message: "I made it without you." But Michael wasn't the type to settle. Tom's words echoed in his mind. Working for someone else pays the bills. Owning something of your own builds a future. That idea burned in his chest. He didn't just want a job. He wanted control over his own destiny. So he saved. Every extra dollar, every overtime shift, every side job working on classic cars in his spare time. All of it went into one goal: his own garage. He researched locations, scouted for affordable rental spaces, and built relationships with suppliers. He wasn't just dreaming anymore. He was planning. It wasn't about proving his parents wrong anymore. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of more than just survival. By the time Michael turned 21, he had accomplished what many thought was impossible. He had become a highly skilled automotive technician, earning over $80,000 a year. Unlike many of his former classmates who were still buried in textbooks and drowning in student debt, Michael was thriving. He had built a reputation as one of the best in his field, with customers specifically requesting him for their high-end vehicle repairs. His work was more than just a paycheck. It was a craft he took immense pride in, a testament to his perseverance and the path he had chosen for himself against all odds. With his growing success, Michael took another step toward independence. He opened his own small garage. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, just a modest two-bay workshop in a quiet part of town, but it was his. A place where he could take on side projects, restore classic cars, and lay the foundation for something even greater. Owning his own space gave him a sense of control over his future that no corporate job ever could. He spent long nights fine-tuning engines, organizing tools, and dreaming about expanding his business. He had no boss breathing down his neck, no student loans weighing on his shoulders, just the satisfaction of honest work and the freedom to carve out his own success. At 23, he expanded that vision even further. He bought his first home in Dallas, a comfortable house with enough space to grow and, more importantly, a large garage where he could continue working on personal projects. It wasn't a mansion, but it was more than enough, and most importantly, it was his. He also purchased a reliable truck, not as a status symbol, but as a testament to how far he had come. He had built something real, something that could never be taken away from him. For the first time in his life, Michael wasn't just getting by. He was truly living. Then, the phone rang. At first, he didn't recognize the number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him pick up. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, his stomach tightened. It was his mother. "Michael," she said hesitantly, as if unsure how to even say his name. "How have you been?" The words felt strange coming from her, almost foreign. It had been years since they last spoke. He had once dreamed of this moment, of hearing her say she was proud of him, of having a conversation where she acknowledged how wrong they had been. But deep down, he knew that wasn't why she was calling. His parents were struggling. His father, Robert, had lost his job. The bills were piling up. The house, the same house where they had once thrown him out, was at risk of foreclosure. They needed help. Financial help. Michael listened in silence as his mother explained their situation. She spoke carefully, cautiously, as if picking her words so as not to acknowledge the irony, that the son they had cast aside was now their best hope. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention the years of silence, the way they had turned their backs on him, the nights he spent wondering if they even thought about him at all. Instead, she spoke as if none of it had ever happened, as if this was a natural conversation between a mother and her son. A part of him wanted to remind her of the night they forced him out, of the words she had said with such certainty. "You'll come crawling back, begging us to take you in." But he wasn't the one begging now. Michael exhaled slowly, gripping the phone. This was the moment where he had the power to say no, to walk away, to let them struggle as he once did, to let them feel the sting of rejection he had endured. The thought was tempting, a form of justice he would have never admitted to craving. But that wasn't who he was. "I'll see what I can do," he said, his voice steady, betraying none of the emotions warring inside him. Because unlike them, Michael had built something real, not just a career, but character. And he wasn't about to let their mistakes define who he became. But he also wasn't going to let them use him. If he helped, it would be on his terms, not theirs. The past couldn't be erased, but he had moved forward. Whether or not they had, that was up to them. As he ended the call, he stared at the phone for a long moment, the weight of everything settling over him. This was not the reunion he had once hoped for, but perhaps, in its own way, it was the closure he needed. Michael had spent years building himself up from nothing. Every success, every dollar he had earned, had come from his own sweat and sacrifice. And yet, now that he had finally made it, his parents, who had once cast him out without a second thought, expected him to step in and take care of them. He wasn't heartless. No matter how much anger and resentment lingered beneath the surface, he couldn't ignore the fact that they were struggling. But he also wasn't naive. He knew that if he opened the door too wide, they would walk right in and take as much as they could carry. So, Michael made a decision. One evening, after much deliberation, he called his mother. She picked up on the first ring. "Michael." "Oh, honey, it's so good to hear your voice." Her tone was warm, too warm, like she had been waiting for this moment, expecting it. "Mom, I know things are tough for you and Dad right now," he said, his voice steady. "I'm willing to help, but I need to make something clear." There was a pause. "Of course, sweetheart. We appreciate anything you can do. I'll send you a one-time amount to help with the immediate situation," he continued. "But I'm not going to be your financial safety net. I worked too hard to get where I am, and I won't let anyone, family or not, take advantage of that." The warmth in his mother's voice cooled slightly. "Michael, honey, it's not about taking advantage. We're your parents. Families help each other. You had the chance to be my family when I needed you the most," he said. "You made your choice then, and now, I'm making mine." Silence. Then came the guilt. "So that's it. You're just going to throw a little money our way and expect us to fend for ourselves." "Yes," Michael said simply. "Because that's what I had to do. And if I could do it at 17, I think you can figure it out now." He could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. His mother wasn't used to him standing his ground. "You don't understand, Michael. Life isn't as easy as you think." He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Mom, I understand more than you ever gave me credit for." The conversation didn't end well. His mother's voice grew tight, her words laced with bitterness. His father never even came to the phone. But Michael didn't waver. He transferred the amount he had promised and left it at that. No more, no less. For the first time in his life, he was in control of his relationship with them. And he wasn't about to give that power away. Lessons learned. As Michael sat in his garage one evening, wiping grease from his hands, He reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The years of struggle, sacrifice, and relentless determination had shaped him into the man he was today. And with that clarity, he realized a few undeniable truths. First, family isn't just about blood. He had spent years yearning for his parents' approval, hoping they would one day see his worth. But love without respect is meaningless. True family, whether by blood or chosen bonds, should uplift, support, and believe in you. If they don't, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is set boundaries. Second, no one has the right to dictate your future. His parents had believed that success only came with a college degree and a white-collar job. They dismissed his passion for mechanics as nothing more than a dead-end path. But Michael had proven them wrong. His skills had not only given him financial freedom, but had also built a fulfilling life on his own terms. Success isn't about fitting into someone else's mold. It's about carving your own path. And finally, the greatest irony of all, they had once thought he wouldn't survive without them. Yet, when the tables turned, it wasn't Michael who needed help, it was them. He had been cast out at 17, told he would come crawling back, broken and desperate. Instead, he had thrived. The boy they abandoned had become a man they now depended on. Michael wasn't bitter. He wasn't vengeful. He had simply learned that strength doesn't come from where you start. It comes from where you refuse to stop.